The NHL Draft starts tonight, and we've got our final predictions. But the NHL has been busy with pre-draft moves, plus a CBA extension that will bring an 84-game season. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders, and you can find us for free over on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Gil, I know you must be more excited than almost anybody that it is finally a draft day because there's probably going to be a Matthew Schaefer in the future for you and your New York Islanders.
Yeah, I mean, since the Islanders won the lottery, this is what we've been looking forward to. And Matthew Schaefer is the prohibitive favorite to be the first overall pick. And, a really solid addition for the New York Islanders, who do not have any really highly ranked defensemen in their prospect pool right now.
Yeah, the Islanders prospect pool has been a little barren for the last several years. So I'm sure Islanders fans are very excited about that. And having had extensive conversations about this draft with many experts, including my Flyers co-host, who's a prospect writer, Michael Misa is pretty much guaranteed at the number 2 slot to the Sharks at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Misa is the top-rated forward. And if you look at the way most scouts and experts have described this draft, you have Schaefer and Misa in one tier, and then a drop, and then there's maybe 5 or 6 players in the next tier, and then a drop. So it's not the deepest draft. There's no generational talent, according to most scouts in this draft, but the top 7 or 8 picks is where the highest ranked players tend to fall this year.
Exactly. And it's very center heavy too. So a lot of teams are going to be able to reload down the middle. I think the Islanders are going to be the rare non center pick in the first 6 or 7 picks of this draft. I think maybe another defenseman could sneak in there at 8. And Rademirka most likely. But other than that, it's going to be all centers all the time. Like Porter Martone can play center, but he's mostly a winger. So
yeah, we got to have at least one, right?
Right. Right. So I think honestly, Martone is one of the more interesting guys that it's hard for anybody to predict where he's going to go. And I think mock drafts this year were just random in a lot of ways, because to your point, there are these tiers that are almost impossible to really say who's going to go where. But I think Martone is one of the more questionable prospects in that top group in terms of where does he fit?
Yeah, I mean, when you have a tier of 5 players who are very close to each other, each individual GM and scouting staff is going to have their own ranking of those 5 players. So it really does open up a lot of questions as to who's third, who's fourth, and so on. And then also who's going to want to come in and make a trade to try to grab what particular player. There have been a lot of rumors about the Islanders trying to come back into the first round and take James Hagens, the Long Island native. But do you need to go to 3, 5, 7? I've seen him go anywhere between 4th and 9th in different mock drafts. Right. So where do you need to get to if you want to grab a particular player that you want?
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons why these tiers of players in similar positions in these particular tiers that have made it a really difficult year to try and move up in the draft, because those top teams have not been serious for the most part about trading those picks. I think teams, especially with centers being a premium in the NHL, teams aren't going to want to give up the opportunity to pick a center in the top 10 of this draft. And I just think it's going to make it difficult for anybody to trade up. Now, could you trade up a spot or two? Sure. I think that's possible. But if you're looking to go from like 27 to 8, like, good luck.
Yeah, that's tough. The only thing that might mitigate that a little bit is that next year's draft is considered so much stronger. So if you offer a team, like if you really want a player at 7 and you offer them your number 1 pick next year, they might be enticed by that because it's a deeper and more talented draft. So many open questions about this
yes
draft.
And no. Yes,
exactly.
And no.
Exactly.
I think it depends on who you are and where you think you might fall in next year's draft too, because like there are going to be tiers and fall off in that draft as well.
Oh,
you know, there's a generational player in it, sure, but bottom half of the first round is still bottom half of the first round most likely. So
right.
I think there's that, but I do think that some teams have indicated that their picks could be in play. Is it subterfuge? I love that part of the draft. I think it makes it fun and interesting, but we've heard, you know, rumors about Boston, about Utah, about Vancouver, most specifically. Nashville, a little bit. Now, Nashville has multiple picks in the first round, so maybe they feel like they can spare one of them to get an asset, whether it's a pick in the aforementioned next year's draft, or it's a player now, or an existing prospect, or something like that. But I think, you know, Nashville is the most intriguing of these picks to potentially get traded.
Yeah, I think so too. And then you have to add in the fact that will Barry Trotz be a little gun shy after everything that happened last year, where he was very bold and it didn't quite work out the way that the Predators had hoped. So, you know, is he going to continue to make bold moves, or is he going to think, maybe I should just play it safe, make my pick and move on from there?
Yeah, I think, you know, the most active rumors that I've seen as of this recording are about Vancouver's pick, which is a more reasonable pick to trade at this point. I would say, you know, you look at where they are right now, and they're sitting at 15.
Right.
So so I think there's opportunities to get a very good player at 15 if you're looking to trade into that pick. And I don't think you have to give up a tremendous amount. You're gonna have to give up a lot, but not like overpay insanely to get to 15.
And then again, if you're Vancouver, do you want prospects? Do you want picks? Or do you want someone who can help your team right now? And, you know, what is the cost of trying to move up to 15? There are so many variables in this draft and so many unknowns. And let's face this, how the board starts to fall, we may not know. Teams may have a particular player targeted, and when that player gets past, let's say, the 6th pick, maybe you pounce right then and there. If they don't get there, there are just so many variables to this whole process.
Yes, and with the Flyers sitting right there at 6, it's going to be a very interesting night for them, also having 22 and 31. So who knows what's going to happen by the time the first round is over. We could have 3 new Flyers prospects, or deals could be made. So looking forward to all of that from the Flyers perspective for sure. But I do think that in some ways it makes it a little easier for the Flyers because they have the luxury of being kind of more in control, which, you know, there's other teams that have that luxury as well. I mean, the Pens now have 2 first-round picks back to back, actually, because they got one from the Rangers that was from a past trade. Columbus has multiple picks. Like I said, Nashville does. Chicago has multiple picks. So it's going to be a pretty active night, I would say, despite the fact that it's being done remotely.
Yeah, I was gonna just ask you about that. I mean, what, if any, impact will that have? And I mean, in my mind, it could go very smoothly, but I just so much prefer having everybody under one roof.
I do too. I think it makes it more fun. I think when you see like the side conversations happening and maybe get wind of something, I think it's easier to do it and faster to do it in person, and you're not dependent on technology. I think it remains to be seen how this will go. I don't enjoy personally the NBA draft. I think it's uninteresting. So, and this is sort of modeled after that. So we'll
Yeah,
see
yeah.
how it pans out there. But as we know, being in Los Angeles, there are going to be some celebrity presenters in terms of announcing picks for different teams. I believe I saw a couple of them out there already. So I'm eagerly awaiting fans of local teams and who they are and finding them out for each of these teams. Do you know any Celebrity Islanders fans?
Ralph Macchio, the Karate Kid.
All right.
We've got that.
All right.
So yeah, we've got a few.
All right. Well, we'll see who announces the Matthew Schaefer pick, assuming that's what it is. In the meantime, teams are also scrambling to make last minute deals and moves and figure out some contract situations prior to the draft. We're going to talk about the latest on that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to the ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you could splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
So as of recording super late on Thursday night, we're trying to sift through these latest rumors here leading into the draft. And Jason Robertson is the name a lot of people are talking about right now. Obviously, as we know, Dallas has cap issues. There are many teams that would love the services of Robertson being such a dynamic forward. And, I think Dallas is in a really tough spot. And I wonder if they'll get it done before the draft begins.
Yeah, it's a good question. They don't necessarily have to do it before the draft or at the draft, but it probably would help them with whatever plans they have to sign players next week when free agency gets underway, even their own free agents for that matter.
Right.
So, they're going to want to get a deal done. And I think it would be important if you're Dallas. Everybody knows they're in this cap crunch. They need a bidding war to get started. That's really... And I think after the trade that went down late on Wednesday night, where I think there was a disappointing return, according to a lot of people, in the JJ Peterka deal, does that lower the bar maybe for Jason Robertson?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that deal was, I think, a little surprising. Of course, that's Utah getting JJ Peterka from the Sabres for Michael Kessering and Josh Doan. And, the Sabres have talked about how much they wanted Kessering, but you can want him all you want, but Kessering and Doan are not the same as JJ Peterka. And the fact that they felt like they had to trade him or wanted to trade Peterka, like does not bode well for the Sabres and their organization right now.
No, it doesn't. I don't think they got enough in return. Quite honestly, I was surprised that no first round pick came. No player who is at this point in the same league as as Peterka rather, changed hands. I mean, Doan has potential, but he's certainly not there yet. And yeah, I mean, if Dallas is in a cap crunch, they may be forced to make a similar kind of a deal if there is no bidding war.
Yeah, I say yes and no to that as well, because I think, yes, that's possible, but also you could just say that the Sabres made a bad deal and didn't know the value of JJ Peterka.
Right.
Whereas I do firmly believe the Dallas Stars know the value of Jason Robertson a lot better. And, they just signed Jamie Benn to $1 million 1-year deal. So they're trying to get their other ducks in a row so they kind of know what they're working with and know how to structure this deal most effectively. So I think that's a good thing for Dallas right now. But there are plenty of other teams doing things leading up to the draft. But we still don't know what's going on with Noah Dobson, do we?
No, we do not. All kinds of rumors. I've heard different teams interested. I heard lately that he wants to possibly go to Montreal, but I don't know if Montreal can put together a good package for him. The Blues have been mentioned as a possible destination. I've heard Boston in the past or Utah as possible destinations. The thing is this: if you want Noah Dobson, his agent allegedly asked for $11 million AAV for a guy who, yeah, it is crazy. The market is going that way. He's a right shot defenseman who a year ago had 70 points, 10 goals, 60 assists. Now, this year he only had 39 points, so the production fell a lot, but his defense is not good. And I'm being kind by saying not good. And if he's inconsistent offensively, talented but not always productive, and his defense is bad, I'm not excited to pay him $9.5–10 million a year. Which is why I think a team with cap issues like the Islanders, you get assets for him, prospects, picks, and move on and not pay him $10 million. I think that could be a win-win if you get the right deal.
Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways it feels like the Minnesota Wild are in a similar position there. They did, make a smaller deal sending Freddie Gaudreau to the Kraken for a 4th rounder in this year's draft, but we still haven't heard anything about Marco Rossi.
Nope. Still waiting on that. And again, all these rumors come out and sometimes deals get done and sometimes they do not. And they end up either re-signing the player or just holding on to the player and letting the contract, wait till the trade deadline sometimes. There are so many things where teams have to determine when is this player going to get you the biggest return.
Right. And like Connor Garland in Vancouver is a prime example of all that. Trade rumors for eons, it felt like, about him. And then he wound up sticking around and now he signed another 6-year deal with the Canucks. So you never know how these things are going to turn out.
Yeah, no, I mean, how many years was John Gibson rumored to be traded, or Trevor Zegras in Anaheim, who finally did get traded all these years later? So you never know when these rumors have, if there's smoke, sometimes there's fire and sometimes not so much.
Yeah. It's interesting times right now. And, free agency is just around the corner and the show will be covering that, of course, next week. Right now, we know that Nick Ehlers is going to free agency from the Jets and is going to test the market there. I don't know what he can get, though. It's one of those deals where, how many years do you give Nick Ehlers at this point, right?
Yeah, and again, the key for his agent is to get multiple teams bidding against each other for his services. Although, you know what? If Nick Ehlers' salary stays the same, but he goes to a state with no income tax,
That's a win for him. Right?
Exactly. That's a raise, even though the salary stays the same.
Yeah. But, Florida teams don't have an advantage. Not at all.
No. Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah. And then, of course, like the big one is Mitch Marner, which, people have been talking about ad nauseum, but he's officially going to go to free agency, which we all knew was going to happen. But, again, with the cap going up, like what can Mitch Marner command?
I've heard as high as 14 million AAV, which is incredible for a guy to play one season of hockey. But you know what? You sign a $14 million AAV for 7 years. By year 3, it'll probably be underpaid.
Yeah, it's again a little bit bonkers stuff going on there. Riley Smith is not going anywhere. Signed a $2 million 1-year deal with Vegas, so that issue is apparently settled, although again crazier things have happened. And then the other interesting thing that happened was Marc-Edouard Vlasic was put on waivers for a buyout from San Jose, and he's just been there for decades at this point.
It feels that way. I mean, Pickles has been part of the Sharks since before they were a contender, during their contending years, and now after their contending years.
I know.
It's almost
is it the Sharks without him?
It's almost like he's part of the arena, he's always there. But now, all joking aside, it's kind of a sad way to end a very, very productive career.
Yeah, I agree. Well, will any of this happen at the draft or right after the draft? Stay tuned to Locked On NHL, and we'll be covering all of it. In the meantime, they have been negotiating a CBA extension that has come with some interesting results, including an 84-game season. We're going to talk about all of that coming up next. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And the thing that I love about Monarch Money is it helps you keep track of those day-to-day things and reduce unnecessary spending on stuff like takeout. But it also helps you plan and budget for big purchases like a new car or a house, all at the same time. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. So it looks like we are getting a new CBA or a CBA extension, I guess, for 4 years that is going to be announced prior to the draft today. It'll run through 2030, and upping the regular season to 84 games, I think, is the biggest part of it. Now, they are going to reduce the preseason games to 4, so there's going to be some balance in the force here. But I think that if you're going to increase the regular season games, I would only do so by reducing the preseason games. So I'm glad they did that.
Look, I have no problem with reducing the preseason. The season was already a little too long in my mind. There are just too many games in January or February where you're like, okay, I don't think they needed to make the season longer, but it was coming. If they can do it, it's more tickets to sell. They'll do it. My concern is if they do expand, and there has been talk recently about that, and they add a play-in round to the playoffs, are we going to have like hockey go from early October or even late September till July 4th? The season is, getting longer. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it's looking like starting in the 26-27 season, which is when this will kick in, that they are planning on trying to start the regular season a week earlier in late September. So It could happen. I would prefer this late September start so that maybe we can end earlier and have it be early June at the latest.
Which would be nice, yeah.
For the Stanley Cup and not have this 2-week melodrama that we had this year. But in addition to the schedule change, they're making some other changes to contracts where you get a max 6-year deal for free agents and 7 years for re-signings. I think that kind of it kind of balances the power out a little bit more. I think this is definitely a win for GMs and for owners because they don't have to commit to these higher salaries for 8 years anymore. I think it's definitely a compromise for the players.
It is, and yet the players can benefit because they would come up a year earlier to get a new contract. So maybe if you're 29 instead of 30, teams look at you maybe a little bit differently. And if the cap keeps going up, like if Mitch Marner signs that $14 million a year contract, by year 4 or 5 of his contract, he may be in the middle of the
That's
race.
true.
So if he comes up a year earlier, he'll get a new contract sooner. It could cut both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, a playoff salary cap mechanism is going to be put in place that'll close the LTR loophole, which is long overdue.
Long overdue. It is. Look, there's got to be some kind of a cap on the playoffs. You can't just load up with players, stash them on LTIR, and amazing, we're starting the playoffs and so is ready to play. And all of a sudden, you've got like three players that you couldn't possibly put on the same team, not only on the same team, but maybe even on the same line. So, it's a loophole that needed to be closed, and I'm glad they're closing it.
Absolutely. And they're getting rid of player dress codes, which I am excited about. I cannot wait for the fashion show. It has been ridiculous that they've been locked down to this suit nonsense. So I'm excited.
Is it a coincidence that they did this the year after Lou Lamoriello left
Maybe.
the Islanders? I mean,
Yeah. And also kind of sad about this one. They're getting rid of e-bugs and they're going to have each team have a full-time e-bug essentially for their team. I'm guessing it'll be like an equipment manager or a trainer or something like that also plays goalie that'll be around the team anyway, but we'll see how that works.
Yeah. The emergency backup goalie, every once in a while you get that Cinderella story that's always kind of fun.
Why does the NHL hate fun?
Exactly. It doesn't happen often, maybe once every few years, but when it does, you gotta just love the fact that this guy who's toiled in anonymity for years and never thought he'd get a chance to play in the NHL, and all of a sudden there he is. I've always liked those stories, but I understand why the league wants to sort of unify it and make it more streamlined and more uniform.
I absolutely understand, but yeah, it was fun while it lasted. RIP e-bugs. Anyway, we will hear all about the CBA changes today as we approach the NHL draft, and Gil and I will be here with our pick reactions with all the other hosts from around the Locked On NHL channel who have first round picks to get their input on what they think of what their team has done as we go through the evening. So stay tuned for that as well. And then Gil will be back on Monday to discuss the latest goings on with 3 of our local hosts as well. That'll do it for today's show. Have a good draft, everybody.